the things we'll focus on in this lecture are texturing methods. There's a lot of things we can do there, and there's a lot of possibility in Blender to mess around with the textures, and it's pretty fun. So that's one of the first things we'll look at. And then volumetrics, like how to do atmospheres, and a little bit about God rays. And then we'll look at a little bit of different lights, but that's very fast, but just the different lights that are there and available. So what we're going to use for this lecture is we're going to use the castles on a hill. That if everyone's created that, then that's great, because we'll modify the scene we already have with the textures and volumetrics. This is the state my castle is in now. I modified the towers a little bit and put some extra detail on the bridge and adjusted things here and there. And then I added some creatures, and you can see they're very long under this this water here, and they were also created in Blender using the sculpting tool there. They have their teeth and everything, so that's great. Yeah, so let's take a look at the first topic, which is just correct scale. So you don't really have to do correct scale, right? If we're doing concept, then correct scale doesn't really matter. We just, whatever looks good, right? But there are some features in Blender, for example, the directional lights, shadows, volumetrics, that behave a bit better if you have an idea of your scale. So therefore, I think it's easier to just work in correct scale. And that will make more sense afterwards. To get a sense of your scale, there are a couple of different ways you can do it. There's this handy little ruler tool, measure tool over here, that you can click on. If you can't see this menu, then it's available on T there. And then this one you can just kind of drag into mid-air. Oh, gizmos are hidden. There we go. You can drag this one in mid-air, and you can get a sense of how long your thing is. And this one is like 9 meters, and I would expect it to be 50 or 100 meters or something like that, right? So my scale is quite small. A different way of looking at your scale is if you grab an object, it's selected like this, then clicking the end panel, then you get these little handy doodads here. And in the top one, there's an option called item. And down here you have this thing called dimensions, and dimensions will just show you in meters how big your object is. And this works for all things in Blender. And it doesn't care about the scale properties of your objects. It just looks at actually how wide they are there. So you can always count on these ones being correct. So that's pretty nice. But my scene is a bit too big, if you create a cube by default in Blender, then it will be 2 meters. That's just how it is, right? So you know that this is, roughly a human. If I scale it down here a little bit, like that, then I have my human scale, and then my castle is way too small here, right? So what I will do is I will take all my things, including my cameras and my sun. I'll avoid my cube, and then I'll go up here in the top, and then I can select my 3D cursor. So basically now this is my anchoring point for all my actions. The 3D cursor is the point in the middle there, right? And if your point is not in the middle, then you press Shift S, then you can say cursor to world origin. Right? And then now your cursor is in the middle again. But essentially it means that if you do any action, it relates to the center. So you're sure that you're scaling everything up and they will stay, pretty relative to each other. So I will just go up here, and I can't actually select the collection. So I have to right click here and say select objects, and then select objects here. And can you actually double select? No, you can't. So I have to go in manually here. Oh, okay. I will just select everything there, and not the cube. Not the cube here. So if I have this thing and I try to deselect it, then I can control drag select on something, and then it will deselect that object. But now I can scale everything relative to the center, right? And I can scale them up so my cube there starts making sense. Let's see here. How big is my things now? If I select my plane, it's around 150 meters. Maybe this is a bit more correct. I'll just keep it like this. It might be slightly inaccurate, but at least it's closer. I have a better sense of the scale, and that would make more sense with directional lights and stuff. Cool. So yeah, that's just making sure that our things are in scale. Okay, then we now have a scene that looks something like this, right? So, and the things I'm doing here is just I'm ticking off the overlays up there. I can't remember if we talked about that, but it's pretty handy if you just need to see your scene like so. Well, we have our scene and it's plain, it's just plain geometry, and we would like to add some textures. And to do that, we will go into the shading editor, right? So we'll open the shading tab here, and then we have on a shading window, and if it's not centered, then you can hit the the dot on the numpad next to 0. That will frame whatever is selected or something like that. Okay, cool. If you select your objects, for example, my bridge here has some it has this material on it, and I named it Castle Rock, maybe Castle Rock matte there. And then here we can do all kinds of things. We can plug all kinds of textures in, and we can get some kind of cool result. So we'll just go through the principal BSDF node here, which is kind of this default node for doing all the colors on your models. And at the top here we have base color, right? And that's where we change our colors, etc. Down here we have subsurface and stuff. It's a little bit more advanced, but essentially it's creating, this subsurface like quality on your objects. Metallicness, right? This controls the metalness of something, and the specularity will determine kind of how much highlight is available on your thing. To be physically correct, then we set it to 0.5, and then we just adjust everything else. But specularity, we can adjust that just for artistic control. But it isn't really physically correct anyways, it's just a close approximation. But I think that's the general rule, that specularity is for artistic control. Roughness is how rough the surface is, and anisotropy, those things, they make more sense if we have specific object for those. And then transmission, and then alpha we can use if we have set our blend mode options like we did with our clouds. And then emission is if the object itself is emissive, right? And this works differently in Eevee and in cycles. In cycles it would actually emit and give light to other objects, where in Eevee it doesn't. Like, you have to use proper lights to emit onto other objects, right? But the object itself will emit. Okay, so I think the ones to keep note of are base color, especially metallicness, roughness, and a normal. Normal here. Normal is the one that gives us the sense of bump. So something that is nice in Blender is because we have this big node editor, we can get a lot of information from something very simple. And what I've done is that I've gone to HDRI Haven, which is what we used last time for getting our HDRI. They also have a sister site called Texture Haven, which just has a bunch of textures available, categorized in nice things. And I went in here and just found a simple texture, and which looks like this. I'll just bring it in here. Oh, come on. There we go. It's just a simple plain texture like that. And you can just drag and drop these ones in. I will do that here from my desktop here. Textures, and let's move the window here. Whoop. Break. Then grab that in there. I just drag it, drop it into the shader editor. And then now I have that texture available. If I plug this texture in, I'm going to look at my bridge here, just straight into the base color here, then it will look a little bit wonky like this, right? It's not really giving us that brick texture sense. And that's because there's something called UVs in 3D, right? And UVs are the way that the textures are laid out. But we're not modelers and stuff. We don't really like UVing because that takes time. So there's a very handy, nice feature in Blender to quickly make everything look 85% good. And then you can always do UVs if you want to. But the quick and handy method is we click on our node here. We press Ctrl-T if we have Node Wrangler installed, and then we get a nice little setup. And then right now you can see by default it's set to UV, and if nothing is plugged in, it's also by default set to UV. That's the default here, right? But if we switch it to object, right? If we switch it to object, then now Blender will kind of interpret the bricks on a global level, or the textures on a global level. So if all your objects have the same scale, so by scale that is over here, if they're all set to 1 in scale, then they will all be the same size. So if all your objects are set to scale 10, then all the brick sizes will be the same scale, right? But right now it doesn't look completely right, and that's because we have to modify our texture layout. So if I go here, we can see we have these things called linear, flat, repeat, single image, all these things. And the one to keep note of here is the one that's called flat. And this is just telling Blender how to wrap the texture around the object. And it's something to do with how things are projected, right? If I set it to box, then we get this, and it's really nice. It works really well for things that are a bit more have edges, you know, things that are square. For spheres and rounded objects, doesn't always work as great, but sometimes you can get away with it, right? But this is definitely pretty usable already. And then you can see underneath here, we will be getting, you know, some seams right there. There's a seam right there. If we then increase our blend, here you can see how that just blends it out, right? And that's something you can do if you have more rounded objects like that. And the blend doesn't really interfere with this, right? But on the edges here, it might blend them out if you have something pretty soft. But you can see it really doesn't make any difference up here. But this technique is super nice for quickly texturing your assets. And you can see that because I have the same material applied to the towers as well, but the scale is different, then the scale of the bricks are different. And you could use this to your advantage, right? You might be like, oh, specifically, I want the same material everywhere, but I want this brick size to be different. Then you might, you know, scale them differently. Cool. So just go out here again. So to control the scale of the bricks themselves, then we could go down here and then just adjust the scales like so, make them bigger, then they become smaller, and then the other way, then they become bigger, right? But there's 3 of these, and I don't really want to control all 3 of them at once. So what I'll do is I will create a new node here by pressing Shift A, search, and then vector transform. No, sorry, not vector transform. Vector math, there we go. And then I will set this one to scale. And it just gives us this little doodad here. I can plug it into scale like so. And then I can set these ones to 1. Then it's just acting as whatever the data that was there before. And then I just have one control for adjusting the scale, which I find pretty useful. And you could do the same thing for rotation things, I think, here with other things, but just the scale one is pretty handy now. Cool. Right now I can see that my scale obviously is set to 9.7 to 1 over here. So I'll just reset the scale on it by going Control A and then setting my scale like that. So Control A and then scale, that applies to scale. Depending on how your mirror modifiers and stuff are set up, this might affect how your things are arrayed. So you might want to apply your mirror modifiers and stuff before that. If you have a modifier on your object like so, then you can apply it like that, right? So just Control A or just click apply on that little, do that there. And just something to keep in mind for next time you make something, that I usually keep my arrays for as long as I can, right? I want to stay as flexible until the very end, even after I started texturing. So just be a little bit aware of the scale if you're thinking about texturing things like this. Cool. A different way to control the scale here, I also just try setting this to scale there. So now these two are the same size. I can just adjust the scale here until the point where it feels natural, so something like that. Because they're both 1 and 1 now, then they're the same size. But a different way to control the scale of something like this is to use another object as the scale master. So you might say that, oh, I don't really want to apply the scale for all the things like we just did. Then you can use a completely different object to control that. So I will create something like a a torus like this, and then I have this torus here, and this will be my handle essentially for controlling my scale. So if I click on my bridge again here, then here we have this thing called object on the texture coordinate node, and that just means that it will take the mapping data from the object here instead. So if I click this one and then select that, then now you can see all the scale have become the same. And then this thing is now the controller of everything. If I scale things up, oh, I'll just reset this thing to median point instead of 3D cursor. They're like, then you can see how all the scales here follow this one. And this is super handy. You can also rotate it. So it's pretty flexible. I work so much in nodes that I almost never do this, but I see it's pretty common to do this. But I'm just so used to doing everything here because I do lots of other things in the nodes also. So I tend not to do this, but I definitely recommend doing it because it's super fast and handy. So just a little thing there. But yeah, so this already looks a lot closer to something usable for our scene, and we could just keep this underneath our set or something like that, right? We don't have to look at it. Okay, cool. So we have this little setup here, and that's pretty handy. And then what is really nice is because we're in that node editor, we can really derive a lot of information just from one image texture. So let's say you just had one image texture, some really special pattern that you don't really have normal maps for, roughness maps for, all these things. Then we could, still get some information from that single texture. So if I wanted to create something like a roughness map, for example, to give us some variation in how it reacts to the light, then I could just create a ramp here, right? A ramp node, and then plop that in. And then if I press Control Shift left click here, then I'm just viewing that node through the node wrangler, and then I can see the output here. And with the roughness, the more white something is, the more rough it is, the more black it is, the more shiny it is, right? So I don't really want any shine, so I'm just gonna adjust my one little point here so that it becomes pretty bright, something like that. And then maybe adjust it a little bit or something like that, just to have some variation. And then maybe I'll change the fall off to ease. Sometimes that gives you different results. Something there is to play with, like this one gives a pretty interesting result. And I can take that, plug it into the roughness, and then Control Shift click on my principal BSDF to view that one again. And then now this thing should react differently to the light. You can see the shine there is different. And if we then, control this one here, then we see little variations there. We don't actually get that much. I'll just set it back to linear here. A bit more straightforward. Like that. I'm just going to do something that has a bit more of a effect here. Come on. Yeah, so you see that difference in shine there. Then if we bring it really close, it's really funny that it doesn't want to behave that much. But yeah, but that's essentially controlling those things. And then we could also get something like a normal map or a bump map to get a sense of height, so the bricks kind of poke out, so they're not just flat on the surface. And to do that, we would create a bump node, and we could create another ramp node here, ramp like so. And then I bring that into the height, and then I'll take my original texture, bring that into the ramp there, and then viewing this one again. And the same goes here, that the white parts, they poke out a lot, and the darker parts, they go in. And here I actually have these bricks in my texture that are very black, but I actually want these creases to be the furthest in. So I could target those. So what I'll do is I'll go all the way over here until I think that, okay, those things appear black. And then I'll bring this one in just to raise everything up a little bit. So I'll start finding somewhere where it's good enough, right? I'll do this a lot actually, where I try to get information from a texture if I want a specific pattern. So something like this looks pretty decent. It's okay if there's some variation, but I still want other things to poke out a bit more. So I could add another node here on the plus sign. So now I have 3. So then I get something like this. It could be that I need one more node maybe, just to blackify everything. And then I start getting a map like that. And I put that into the height, and then the normal output from the bump goes into the normal. Then I see the result here. Then we're getting kind of that definition of the things poking out. And if we really increase, the strength or something like that, then that will affect it more or less. I'll just set it kinda low, maybe something like that. And then I get a bit of that variation on the texture there. Very cool. So yeah, so that's just a way of like getting a bit of information from the from one map, right? And then we can use that in various ways. Another thing is that you might have this original color. You might want to change it. And if you just want to change it fast, then I think the hue saturation node is really nice. It's just, like it from Photoshop. And here I could really, bring down that saturation, bring it closer to the original color I had, something like that. And yeah, and there we really start seeing that shine. That is a bit too extreme now. There we go, something like that maybe. Cool. And yeah, and here can I adjust it on the saturation node. And then I could also shift the hue a little bit, so maybe it's more of a purplish castle or something like that, right? And then I have that thing. And you can see the bump is definitely giving us a lot of little highlights. At least I can see that here on my screen. So we could, bring it down a little bit like that. Cool. Then I'll try to texture the plane here. Last time we created something.
So William, could you one more time, just because I'm trying to work while you're in, could you just the box thing, how did you control whether it was a box? How do you texture? Just quickly, just
yeah. So I mean this thing, the box here, or with the handle.
Okay, cool. I didn't know where it was. Okay, cool.
Okay,
I just couldn't find it. All right, thank you.
No problem. Okay, cool. Yeah, I guess that's a good time to just, if there's any other questions, then hold it a little bit. Oh, okay, good. But yeah, so the same goes for the plane here. If you want to texture this, then we could do it the procedural way that we did last time, but we could also bring in some textures, and I downloaded some textures here from Texture Haven. And here, for example, I have a diffuse material, I have a normal material, and a roughness map. And I think actually this one's there and that. I'll just use those three there, and I'll just drag them in one at a time here, like so. And we'll create a similar setup to the one we created before. So Control T, then object like that. Then I will create a vector math here. And again, once again, if you find using the object easier, then just do that by all means. I'm just so used to doing it this way that it's kind of difficult to move that habit. Okay, cool. And then I have that texture here. I can then map it into my base color. And then I can set it to box here as well. Oh, I set this to 1. So then I have my texture. And definitely the scale. I want the scale to be a bit more, these bigger patches, like so. Not too much of a need to do any blending here. That looks just fine. Cool. And then we have, excuse me. Then we have our roughness map also. And I think what's important to note here is that by default, when you import an image texture into Blender, it will set it to sRGB. But when you have maps that aren't color information, but that are more related to the values, so for example, black and white values, or like a normal map thing, then set them to non-color. That will just give you a raw, the raw data, where with color, there's all kinds of, different color profiles to getting accurate colors. So all kinds of uncompression and recompressions are happening and on color. So therefore, to get the right result color-wise, they're just set to sRGB. But for other stuff, set them to non-color down here in color space to get the pure value. This is especially important for normal maps, otherwise you won't really get the expected result. So here we have this one, and we can just take the same node network here and use the same vector inside of our thing. We'll set this one to box also, set this one to box, and then we can do the same here. And if you want to group these things together, you can what is it, control, oh no, it's a shift like this. So if you hold shift and then click right click and then drag, then you kind of group those nodes together. And then it just makes it more handy if you need to reroute things. So they're all going into the separate vectors there. And then my roughness, I'll plug into my roughness here, and then roughness should behave like it should. Cool. And then my normal map here, I have to like pass that to a normal map node. Note before we used a bump node, which is turning black and white into a normal map. But here we already have a normal map that looks like this. So we just pass it through a normal map node to convert that into something usable. Plug that into my normal there. And then now you can see those little indentations here, right, from that texture. So that's pretty nice. Cool. Nice. Let's see here, anything else there? Any questions so far on this topic? Materials or textures? No. Okay, cool. Yeah, so hopefully you should be able to have a few techniques now for texturing your assets. I don't really want to touch too much on UV editing, but if everyone needs a fresh lesson on it, then every object in 3D space has some kind of 2D grid that determines where their textures go. If I go into edit mode and then I just select everything on a specific object, then I jump to UV editing, you can see that there's this map over here on the left side, and that is the UVs for your thing here, right? And you could unwrap everything by going to U, and then Smart UV Project, or just unwrap. But Smart UV Project will just give you a quick approximation or quick layout of your things. And you could play with these things to get different results. And sometimes I'll do that also. But it has its own set of tools, and maybe we can touch on it later. But yeah, just so you know that that's where they are if you want to do further studying on that. Cool. All right. Next thing, let's look a little bit at the different kinds of lights. We obviously have a sun, which is our main source of light. And then in the add menu on Shift A here, there are some different lights. There are a point light. And what is important to note here is that they behave a little bit differently according to which render you're in. So I'll just bring that closer to a surface here. Yeah, so we have our point light here. And obviously in the top here, we can change the color of the light. And then we have our power, and that's set in wattage. Right? So you could write, oh, I want a 500 kilowatt lamp, right? And then it's a 500 what is that, 500,000 watts? Or 5 watts or something like that, right? So it's like that, so that works pretty well. Then radius will kind of determine the, I guess, the scale of the light bulb itself, but also makes it more soft, so there's something there to play with. And then shadows is whether or not it casts shadows, and then context shadows is whether or not it adds to the ambient occlusion effect in your scene, which we haven't touched upon yet, but we'll get there. Then we have the sunlight, which we kind of know. And then we have the spotlight. Spotlights are pretty nice. They work like this. So if you need to do something very dramatic with a cool gangster scene or something like that, then they work nice for that. And then we have the area light, and the area light is probably the closest thing you'll get to proper studio lights. So if you're having a very studio or like a interior lighting, you'll probably be using a lot of area lights to light up your scene, because they just give this broader surface. And you can adjust the scale, etc., etc. Cool. That's just the different lights. And the way that the lights work is just whatever light you create over here, you can always change it to another light. Cool. Those are the different lights there. Then we will jump into volumetrics. And actually, but just right before we jump into volumetrics, I just want to show a trick with the HDRI. So right now we just have one HDRI in our scene, right? And that both shows our background, but it also lights up the ambient, like the darker parts of our scene, right? But sometimes we don't want that because maybe we like the clouds the way they are in that brightness, but maybe the shadows are too dark or something like that. So there's a handy setup that I really like using, that I think makes this a bit easier. So if we jump into shading, then instead of object, then we go into world. Then we can see our little node set up here for our HDRI. And what we can do here is that we can duplicate this setup, and then we can choose what is affecting the shadows and what we're seeing in the background. So I will take these things here, just duplicate them by pressing Shift D. So selecting everything and then Shift D, then you duplicate. And then we have the same setup here. But I might actually, yeah, no, I'll do it like this. Whoop, this was not what I was supposed to do. There we go. And then I will use a mix shader node here. So mix shader nodes lets you mix these green nodes here, and they're just, you know, shader nodes, and with the mix shader you can mix in between them. So I'll plug these two in here, then I'll plug that in there, and you shouldn't see any difference because they're identical. But then we'll create this handy node called, is it info? No, oh, what is it called? It's called light path. That's what it's called. So this light path node gives us a bunch of information about the scene, and one of those is this is camera ray. So essentially, just it checks in the view if something is being viewed by the camera, and then it alters what we see, and that's different, of course. If the object over here is in shadow, then it's receiving the things differently. So if we use this is camera ray, we can then start to change what affects the shadows and what is in the background. Right, so just plug it into the factor there. And then now if I increase the brightness here, you can see I can increase the brightness of the shadows, but it's not affecting the backgrounds. And this can be super handy if we need that artistic control, right? Where I'm like, okay, you know what? I want this really bright background, but I want really dark shadows, or I want something a bit more like that, or the other way around, right? Where I want this really bright, etc. So I just think having those two things separate is really handy. And I always set this up if I am setting up an HDRI or something like that. And you also have separate control then on the rotation. So maybe I wanted the shadow lights to be a little bit different, and this is especially visible when rendering in cycles. In Eevee it's less visible, but maybe depending on what you need here, then you can see how it affects the shadows in the water there quite a lot with the reflections. We could even do something like that, but then would mimic that we have two suns, so we're not going to do that. But yeah, definitely something to keep in mind. I think it's super handy to have it like that. Nice. Okay, any questions about that? No? Cool. Then we'll jump into volumetrics, and for volumetrics we're doing both like a global atmosphere and a kind of a murky water. We want to give our water a sense of depth. We'll start with the bigger atmosphere here. So to have atmosphere in your scene, typically you would create some kind of volume for your volume. So I'll take a cube here and I'll just scale that up to encompass my scene roughly. Something like that. Now I have my scene encompassed here. Then I'll go back to the shading editor and I'll jump over here to object instead. Now I'm in object. Just zoom out here a little bit. And this cube has no material, and that's why there's the button new. We'll make it new, and we'll call it volume mat here. There we go, volume material. And so far we've just been using stuff that plugs into the surface, but we actually want to plug something into the volume now. So I'm going to remove this surface thing and delete my principal BSDF, and now this just has no data whatsoever. And I'll click Shift A, search, and I'll say principled volume. And this is kind of this default volume node in Blender. There's some other ones, but this is probably the one you'll be using the most. We'll take our volume here and plug it into volume. And then now we're not seeing anything. And this is where that scene scale comes in pretty handy. So by default, the volume, just because of the way the rendering works in Eevee, it limits when to render to be more performant. So if we jump over here into our render settings up here, and then go into the volumetric section here, then we have the start and end things here. And I think default it's set to 100. And essentially it just means that that's kind of where it will stop rendering, right? And apparently my camera now is more than 100 meters away from the scene, so we don't see anything there. So I have to really increase this one to the point where it encompasses everything. And if I just check the volumetrics of my block here, then it's around those 150. I'll set this to, I don't know, 300, then I'm pretty sure. Maybe actually 150. This will depend on where my cameras are, obviously. Something like that, probably. I think this is pretty good. And then I will adjust my density here. I'll set it pretty low. Because you can see already there at 0.01, then it's pretty thick, the atmosphere there. And then you can adjust your end here. And this is, you really have to play with these settings to get to the right result. Probably your tile size is set to 8 pixels by default. The lower you set the tile size, the more kind of fine-grained detail you'll get in your volume. And this is only relevant for Eevee. In cycles, they just kind of have infinite resolution or kind of calculated resolution. And samples is how many attempts it will use, or many times it will use to kind of render that volume to avoid noise here. Cool. And you can see we're already starting to get a little bit of this strobed lighting. And this will be more evident if you have a darker scene. So the darker your scene is, then the more those strobes kind of appear. Okay, cool. So the volume here, I think most of the information is not super relevant to what we need to do, but something that's nice to play with is the color, right? If we change the color of our setup here, then you know, we get a different colored atmosphere. Something like, I'll just set it to white here, so we have that kind of atmosphere there. And maybe I will see if I can bring down the density a little bit, like that. Then maybe I should bring in my density here. So you can also see, because this kind of affects the how far in the volume goes, the lower I bring it, the thinner the volume becomes. And so it can also just be a control for that. At the end of the day, you're just looking for whatever works. Sometimes you don't want any volume at all near your camera. So you could also just bring your volume in, so it starts further in, and then you kind of have that control of saying, okay, fine, where does it begin? And sometimes, you know, you might want to have different thicknesses of volumes in different areas of your scene, and that can also help just for that artistic control. All right, cool. Something I think that's nice is controlling how much volume there is vertically, because often you see that, you know, dust kind of settles down, so you see more dust at the bottom of your image. And what I'll do there typically is affect the density. And here we'll have to do some nodes again. So if I do a gradient texture here, I think something like that, I just jump out. Then if I look at my gradient node here, then you can see what it's giving me. It's giving me this kind of left to right feel here. So if I click it and Control T, Then we get this node set up, and then I could rotate it along the different axes here. And if I rotate around Y here, set that to 90, then we're getting this black to white feeling here. I might actually go the other way, which I can't, so I won't do that. And this one is just set to generated, and I think that's because it's a procedural node that then it registers that. But then we have this black to white, and we could then affect this with a ramp node. And then we could reverse these. Now we have white in the bottom and black in the top. And we could plug that into our density here, like so. We could view our volume. And essentially it just means that our volume is thicker at the bottom and thinner in the top. We should see that here somewhere. So we see that we're getting that little bit of fade. But the effect is pretty intense still. So I will just grab a math node, like so, and then set it to multiply, like that. And I'll just decrease that so that the density is not as thick. Something like that. I'll just increase this a little bit again so it's easy to see. Yeah, so then you could play with this one and say that, okay, I really want more of that thickness towards the bottom here, like that, and then we get this clearing in the top. You could also change the fall off to something like ease, then maybe you get a nicer fall off. Like that, right? I'll set it to something like that. So I think this can be quite nice, quite effective, this like you know, settled dust at the bottom here. Cool. So that's a little bit about the volume. There's some other settings here. Additionally, there are volumetric lighting, which just makes it work. And then you have volumetric shadows, which doesn't have a huge effect right now. In the current versions of Blender, that part is a little bit buggy, but they're working on a newer update to the volumetric shadows where they look way better. So the volumetrics will be way more usable in the next coming month or something, I think. And then the volumetric shadows, you'll see a lot more use out of that one. Cool. Then we'll do something similar for the water here. We will create a cube also for the water, like that. And then we will just adjust that there and create some kind of area like that. And then here, I'll just hide my water plane there for now. And then I'll create a new material. I created my water volume mat. There we go. And then we can do this nice little setup where we have a surface actually. So I create a principal BSDF here. Oh, we already have one. So we create the same water surface we had last time. So some kind of get a noise texture, something like that. And then, oh, not a white noise texture, a noise texture, etc. Maybe a node there, Control T to get that. And then a bump node. Plot that into the height, into my normal here. And then what is not behaving here? Huh. What is happening there? Is that just because it's generated? Sorry, 2 seconds. Just need to load here. Okay, this there is just because the light is tricking it. Okay, cool. So we have that bump node set up there for our water texture. That's fine. I think.
Sorry, William. It just that went very, very quickly. It's probably just me. I mean, so you basically just add all these. Do you have to do it in that? Order, or can you just basically just first add the texture coordinates and mapping, or how do you do?
Yeah, no. I mean, I just thought because it's similar to the things we've done before. So,
okay.
But so I didn't want to spend too much time. But essentially, it's just, you know, it doesn't really matter which order, right? But if we create the bump node, then
okay.
Yeah, so it doesn't really matter. And then when you have your noise texture, then You could just create the texture nodes separately, but then otherwise on Control T, you just get it, right?
Yeah, then you can. Oh yeah, okay, okay, cool. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
There, object there, yeah. Yeah, it's just not very visible, but that's fine. It's just a light there. There we go. Cool. That's what I wanted. Nice. Okay, so we have our thing here. We're just gonna make a similar water shader like we did last time. So I will turn down the roughness to quite low, and I will maybe set my color here to something green blackish like that, and then I will set my alpha down maybe to 0.5, and then I'll go to the material portion here, and then blend mode, then alpha blend, and then now the thing should become transparent once it's done compiling here. There we go. So we have this transparency thing going on here. Nice. So that's the surface of our water. Then we want to mess with the volume itself of our water. So I'll just bring those out there. And here we can use a combination of the principal volume, which we used before. And I could set the color to something pretty crazy like that. And then maybe lower the density a little bit. And then we can bring that into a mix shader node here. That. And then we can bring out another node called volume absorption. And the volume absorption kind of absorbs colors. And I think I can't remember if it's absorbs the color that is shown or if it reflects the color that is shown. It's a little bit weird, but we'll see here. Then bring these two things together, and then we can bring it into our volume, and then we'll start seeing some things. Waiting for it to compile. The volumes are obviously a little bit heavier to work with, so if your machine is not super fast, then this is not as nice. So here we start seeing these kind of volumes affecting here. I'll just unplug the surface a little bit, just so we can see the volume for itself, and I'll just isolate it and bring closer. So yeah, it's pretty dense right now. I'll just decrease the density here. Maybe, sorry, I just need to adjust my settings. 50. So we have this pretty dark water, and I just need my light back here. Sorry, just so it's visible and clear. Okay, yeah, so that's pretty dark, and then that's also because our absorption color here is probably pretty dark here. No, is there something wrong here? Wait, I just need to check my notes. What's going on? Okay, there we go. Okay, yes. So just put that back. Sorry. So on the volume absorption, then the density is pretty thick here. So I'll just bring that one down also. And then we're starting to get that kind of natural, that kind of greenish vibe that we know from waters. So if I bring that down to our level here, somewhere like that, and then turn on our surface here again. There we go. Always gets a bit complicated with the nodes. Then we'll start getting the effect that we're looking for. Okay. So here, maybe our water's a bit too see-through here. I'll just check. No, that should be. Bring our alpha down a little bit. So yeah, but that's essentially the setup there. It's a playing around with a lot, but I think having these two things playing in parallel helps affect the watercolor. You can really change the murkiness in a way, and then just playing with the densities of them in different ways will give you a result. But I think it's easier if you just play with it. But I can recommend this setup into the volumes, and then having some kind of reflective water shader going into the material output.
I have a quick question for this.
Yes.
This is also how I did the water last time I did it, and I don't know if I missed this, but the box, the volume box, the cube, right? Was that just a normal cube?
This cube here?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Was that was just a normal cube?
Just a normal cube, yeah.
Okay, then I actually don't have a question. I thought it was something else.
No, it's just a normal cube.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. I want to see if there's any other settings here. You can always play with the emission also a little bit on this one, and that will give you something else to kind of, if you want that emissive quality in your light here. And we have multiple volumes, you know, now kind of conflicting with each other. So I'll just hide this one, and then etc. Right? And volumes always look a lot better in cycles, but in EV, this is the things that we're kind of going for. But there we get that kind of fall off in the water there. Yeah.
William, do you think you could, I mean, after the lecture, when you put the video up, also just take a screen grab of your settings, of the water setting, just the note settings, just so I can like open that and then look through it and see.
Yeah.
Because it's just when the video is going, it's actually nice just to have the settings just to see what you're actually plugging into and stuff like that.
I have them already here, so I'll just send you those, and then you can get those. Yeah.
I have a quick question also, William, because water and stuff like this is something you use pretty regularly.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to save this setup of notes for like a quick access or something like that?
Yeah.
Across scenes.
Yeah. I mean, we'll get to that in the next one because it's a bigger topic. But I definitely want to cover it. It has to do with asset management and asset browsers and stuff like that. But yeah, for sure.
That would be really nice.
Cool. Okay, so that's on volumes there. See here. What do we have left here? A little bit about guard rays. So just going back to our guard rays here, or our volume, our main volume. Oh, okay. That's extreme for the water there. Put that one down there. So we have these strobes of light that we can see in our main volume, and I will just bring it up here so it's a bit more clear again. With those strobes, and then if I just bring the darkness here, so then so if your ambient light is pretty dark, then you see those strobes much more clearly. And if I rotate my sun here, you can see how those strobes they change, and these strobes are affected by the clouds that we have in the top. So if you change your clouds, you will get different patterns. So if I just select my clouds here, and then if I really clamp down on my things here, then you can see how that really affects those volumetric rays there, right? So just be aware of that, and I can adjust my scene like that, and now I have lots of these lights. If you're not getting a really good, getting nice guard rays here, then you can go to our light options here for our sun. Then the angle, if you affect the angle, this will also affect shadows, but also affect these guard rays. The lower the angle is, the smaller the sun is in a way. The bigger the sun is. How does it work? Essentially, it just makes the shadows softer the higher you go with your angle. So if you set it to something like 90, you get this really big soft thing, and it just means that light is coming from everywhere, I think, and then everything just becomes really soft. But if it's really small in the angle, then you get this much more directional effect here and a cleaner light source. So that's something to play with. You'll see it also in shadows. I think if you can see how it's softening up the shadows there. So you can use this for some kind of space effect where you get those really sharp, clean shadows there. Cool. Okay, I think that is. How long do we run for now? We run for, I think we're there now actually. With the things I want to cover now, there's also a lot, the different texturing things. So any last questions for these things?
I just had a question regarding when you add new objects and you want to hide the other objects behind or the other meshes. You did something with the way you hide the water. Well, you had a quick
for hiding this one, for example.
Yeah, or for hiding actually the water material or the water plane to see other things. If you just want to see model something new and you want to hide all your stuff.
Okay. Yes. So if I create, for example, a new cube, and I only want to see that cube,
Yes.
then I press apostrophe, so right next to enter. Then you get this local view, and it's the same as going to view, and then going to local view, and then say toggle local view, and you can see the shortcut for it there.
Great.
And then just toggling those back and forth, like so. I want to see if I can get this water. With water, it's definitely like trial and error, just because it'll really depend on the scale, and the volumetrics are so sensitive to the scale of your scene. There's not really a one trick fits all kind of thing there. Yeah, that is pretty much what I want to talk about for this lecture. All about nodes.
Great. Is anybody else who has questions either to that or to other things we have been covered?
Very quick one also. William, how come that you use HDRI, what's called Haven textures, and you don't use what's it called, megascans?
I do use megascans.
You do use megascans.
Yeah, no,
it's just for showing the setup of this.
It's because megascans is its own. There's some other things I want to talk about in regards to how to use megascans in some ways, and it's just a bigger subject. But no, I use megascans. But sometimes, I think it's pretty interesting. Sometimes with megascans, they have a few specific textures that I'm missing. I quite like some of these aerial rocks that they have texture haven. So for bigger planes, there's just a few ones that I use a lot from texture haven that I really like. And there's also HDRI haven is here, and I can't remember. I don't think they have HDRIs in megascans, do they?
I think they do, but I could be wrong.
Do they have HDRIs? No, I don't think they have atlases.
But, I mean, also that you just show how to set it up instead of just clicking one button is definitely also useful.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it's nice because a lot of the times, especially with work, then there's this specific pattern. You know, if we're doing some kind of weird interior, then there's a specific weird pattern that'd be really nice to have for some sci-fi corridor, and the texture just doesn't exist. But extrapolating that texture from something you just find on Google Images, right, is pretty handy.
Yeah.
So yeah, what they also have on Texture Haven is this thing called 3D Model Haven, which gives you a few models. I've never used these models. They're really high quality models, but they have 38. But if you really need, that specific ukulele, then it's there for you. But obviously megascans have a lot more things. Yeah. Cool.
I have a last question, and that is regarding the mist. I have had some problems when I tried to do it with the volumetric one and doing it in cycles. So either it's literally taken hours to render, or it has just barely shown up. Do you have any idea what that could have been I've done wrong?
So the volumetrics in cycles are super heavy. And that's just how they are. I never use the volumetrics in cycles if I can get away with it, because I don't want to wait for the render times. At work, where I worked before, then we would actually use the volumetrics in cycles, and the renders would take 20 minutes, and I was sitting there waiting, right? But then there was a guy at the office who had a beefy ass computer, and he was like, "Yeah, I can render anything in 2 minutes." I was like, "Okay," but it doesn't work for me because I don't have that set up. So I just use volumetrics in Eevee if I need that result, especially if I want the God rays. Sometimes I want that result, and we will actually do a setup where we'll render out the volumetrics separately and then comp them together in Photoshop. But the real one I use most of the time is actually what's called the mist pass. The mist pass is something you see over here. I'll just adjust here. Looks like this. And then I'll render out this kind of an image for Photoshop, and then I'll do that as some kind of layer blend mode in Photoshop. And it's a lot more, I think, easy to manage because it's simpler. You get that front and back, and then I can just do my regular brushes for my atmosphere. But it relates more to what we'll talk about next time with render passes and comping things together. So yeah, just avoid atmospheres and cycles if you don't want to wait. Cool, but should we take a break then, and then come back for the Q&A?
Yep.
Cool.
Cool.
All right, so we'll be back here in 5 minutes. Coffee break. The video you record. That we could maybe do that setup that you, when you made the first session for the first hour, just save that and render that out, and then make a separate one for the Q&A. So we can almost already place that up. That's the first video online, so people can just jump back in if there's anything they need while we're having the Q&A, and look at the video while working, while we have this this extra session here.
Yeah, I mean, I can do that, but usually I trim it a little bit. Then it takes like an hour to process it, before you guys can get it. But you can just get the really raw version that is there now, which have the entire introduction and stuff.
Yeah.
Can you actually? Ooh, no, I have to. No, because I have to convert it. It's because I have to save it in this FLV format.
Yeah. Okay. Fine.
So,
There was
yeah.
just
No, it makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. No, but that would be nice. Maybe I can do that next time. Actually, I'll see if it's possible.
Yeah. Sure.
That's a good point. Everyone back? Everyone's back? More or less. More or less. If anyone is struggling with the water, then I did post some node setup things. So I just want to touch on a few things with the water. Increasing the metallicness of your water sometimes helps with the feel of the reflection on top of the surface, and yeah, so play with that, and then the roughness. Those two things will definitely do a lot also. And if you really want to get into the big guns and the fun things of your scene, then you know, jump over to the render settings in Blender up here by the camera, and then turn on something like screen space reflections, which will make your scene look a lot nicer. If I jump over here, turn on, you can see how it's making these reflections appear on the castle scene here. I can show a brighter scene maybe. Like that. And the screen space reflections are adding a lot of detail to the scene there. But these things we'll also cover next time. It's just there's a lot of things you can do here with these things that didn't really want to get too much into it. That's not really behaving how I thought. But yeah, if there's any questions, then please, I'm here. Ask away. Just what the fuck.
William?
Hmm?
My shadows doesn't really work. They work, but they're like they just seem so blurry, and they don't. I mean, it seems like I have like I don't know, the light just doesn't seem to cast like really dark shadows like you're doing.
So just shadows in general?
Yeah, but it doesn't cast shadow on the object either.
Okay. So this relates to the probably relates to the shadow scale.
Okay.
So if you grab your sun here, right?
Yeah.
And then go underneath the light option there.
Yeah.
Then you have this option called cascaded shadow map. There,
Yeah.
it's pretty hidden, and there's a max distance. So the sunlight has a max distance it will put out. So if your scene is pretty big, then maybe try adjusting that one.
Okay.
Just make it bigger.
Yeah, but I tried that, and because I made it like 2000, and it didn't. And my scene isn't that big.
Okay, so you're up here, right? So right now we're in material preview, and then if you jump down,
yeah, sorry.
So if you're in material preview or rendered, if you just jump over to rendered, then you have scene lights and scene world turned on.
It's viewport shading. It just says that it can't. I'm sitting on a Mac and it's pretty slow. Okay. It doesn't show me the viewport setting. It just says viewport shading, but it doesn't show me the menu that you're using underneath.
There's a little arrow there.
Yeah, but I click on it and then it says viewport shading, but then the lighting, it doesn't show that, and that's hidden. It only says it's like yeah.
Can you screen dump what you see? Also just of your thing, then. And you can also, if you have problems, you can save your scene and then you can send me your scene, and then I can see if there's something weird with it. I did that for Frederick also in the weekend even. Where was this?
Actually? It was in the weekend. Thank you for helping.
God,
I didn't expect him to answer it before.
But then don't send anything. That's what you told me.
That's only right.
All right. So this is. Should I just send it in a Slack channel or?
In the Slack channel. I mean, personal. That's you decide.
Yeah, I'll just. Nobody.
If you don't want other people to look at your file, then.
No, that's fine. It's just I don't. It's easier for the Slack channel to just be Slack channel. So this is the screenshot.
Oh, yeah. Let's see here. Okay. Yeah. That's.
I mean, that shouldn't. But I'll save it and try to restart and see if anything else. See if it comes back on, and then I'll send it to you.
Yeah. Okay. No, it feels. I wonder if there's a bug on Mac. Maybe you just do a quick switch. I've never seen that because maybe I'm guessing it's because the scene lights things is not turned on.
Yeah. Okay.
Or maybe.
Okay, like I'll quit it and see if that helps.
Yeah. Why is my...
It's still saying the same thing.
Can you try sending me your file? Just save your file and then send it, and then I'll take a look if something weird is amiss.
Thanks.
Where is my... It took... Mm-hmm. Come on. Where is my? Definitely having my own issues, so
Okay.
they have issues, I guess. What the? Frick? Okay. Hmm.
Is it the reflection that's the problem right now, William?
Yeah, for me, yeah, I think I'm also running a weird alpha version of Blender, so it could be.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Because I remember you had to go in and turn something on. I think that's also how
Yeah, screen space
Quentin
reflections.
Bill did it in the tutorial I watched.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has a pretty nice water. No, actually, his water shader. There's something I didn't like about it. What was it? I mean, used a lot of reflection planes and other things.
Yeah, the reflection plane, that's the one I was thinking.
Yeah. I think I had that one and then I changed it a little bit to a way that I thought was nice. I thought this was a bit too random as to how it behaved. But yeah, it's a nice shader nonetheless. Pretty nice shader. What is going on here? Come on. Black section. Yeah, that's how it's supposed to work. Cancel. Okay, but that's 2.92. Cool. Okay, yes, thank you, Jonas. So just a little thing for everyone about packing when they're sending files. Then in Blender there is this thing called packing. So if you want to send your file and you want to make sure all your textures come along with it and stuff, then I don't need your textures right now, so it's totally fine. But if you go File and then External Data and then click Automatically Pack into .blend, this thing will make sure that all your textures are packed into your blend file and they'll be shipped along with it. It's really handy, and this makes for it's very convenient. So just a little side note there. Automatically pack into the blend. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, so I have this viewport shading thing here.
Oh, you just have it. Okay.
So I just have it, yeah. I'll just quickly try to set up here again. So you have your node network here. Pop, pop, pop. Some different things there. Let's see if I can find mine. What was this one actually? This was the Opera. Do I have that one? No, let's use cloud layers. Sorry, you'll get a new fancy HDRI. Okay, that does seem like the things are short. Okay. So
there is like some light, but it's not like that much light.
Yeah. What I can see is that I think your renderer is set to EV there, volumetric lighting there. Yeah. Okay. And I'll just hide this one. Right. Yeah. So no, it does look like your shadows are working. It could also have been that your background was so bright.
Okay.
That because I will tend to put this down to at least 0.5 just to get harsher shadows because it's just easier, right?
what is where's the what are you
Yeah.
controlling? Is that the light controlling, or is that the...
Yeah, I'll show you. So the HDRI right now, right, it's
Ah.
casting all the ambient light. So if I go to the world option, then on the background node there's the strength. I'll just pull that one down, and then it becomes darker. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try that.
I think that will definitely help with the shadows.
I just need to find the HDR.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't have the viewport shading thing. That's weird.
So where?
So just if you go to the shading tab and then world,
Well, yeah.
then you have that green node background.
And then it should be 0.5 or 0.2.
Yeah. No, you could also just drag on it. Yeah. Does that give you more shadows?
Yeah, but not as much as on what I can see on your screen.
If you bring it all the way down, you then...
No,
Okay. So it's just not black. It's still bright.
it's still bright. That
Okay.
seems like, yeah.
Are you on viewport shading here, or are you on that one?
I'm on. Oh yeah, okay. I was on the other one. Yeah, okay. Now it turns black.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, so the second one will just... Because apparently if you can't see those things, which is really weird, I don't know, there's a bug there. You're supposed to be able to see those. It just has this default HDRI setup, so that's why it's not behaving, where this one will show you the render.
Yeah, okay.
So just,
Yeah, it does. All right, cool. Awesome.
Sweet.
Thank you very much.
No problemo. There. Recent castle scene. Come on, screen space reflections. Come on. Save. What? Okay. Plane. Okay, that makes sense. Didn't actually know that.
If there's no more questions, we can maybe also end this session earlier today. So we can set it to maybe just 11:15.
That's fine.
If that is okay with people, we can move on to other things.
Yeah, I have one question. When I render it, it almost becomes completely white. Is that just because I've set the volumetric wrong, or is it a...
I mean, what you see through your camera angle should be what you get. So. Wait,
Okay.
wait. So if
so it becomes even more white when I render it than it shouldn't.
I can try opening your scene again here. So I'll just
Jonas, when you look at the top right of your screen with the, you know, where you choose the shading mode or whatever,
Yeah,
is it on the last one, like Edison Williams, or is it on the second to last one?
it's on the last one.
It is on the last one. Okay, weird. Because it kind of sounded like it was showing you just like I don't remember what the different modes are called. Like it was shaded mode, but not
Yeah.
light or whatever.
Jonas, is it completely white or just like?
No, it's just very white. I
Can you
I can
just
send
screen
you
them?
I can screen them the two images.
Yeah. Nice.
It looks like it might be some of the fog, but I'm not quite sure.
You maybe have a light in there that's off in the viewport,
yeah,
but
okay.
still on in the render.
Oh, okay.
Well, it could be, yeah. Could be that you turned off in the viewport, not in the render. I've made that mistake.
I do have a light that's I can delete that light maybe.
But it's because that in the top right, there's like those two different things you can turn off, and you can turn them off either in the viewport or in the render. If you only turn them off in the viewport.
Yeah, but I had an extra light. I can see that.
Okay.
That I just deleted that. Cool. Thank you.
Is it still very white?
No, it now it looks fine.
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't look it. It looks.
It looks.
It doesn't look very good, but it does. But it does it.
But also just double check your density.
Yeah, but I took my density down now, so it's
cool.
Awesomeness.
Yeah, I'll just show a last trick with the water. Just if anyone's curious, then just something actually I didn't know, but it makes perfect sense. There's this option over here that says screen space reflections. It we'll cover next time, but if anyone want to get ahead, and it lets you reflect things in surfaces, and you can see how it's affecting the building, right? But it doesn't really affect the water, and that's because the water is set to alpha blend, which I didn't actually know that was a thing, but it has to be set to opaque, and then you will get those proper reflections. But now we can't see through the water, so we'll actually be using a different method, which is having a reflection plane. I think here somewhere. And then we'll use this one to create reflections in a different way. But I'll cover this next time. But just so if you want those reflections now, then you can turn on screen reflections and make sure your water is set to opaque and not alpha blend. But then you don't get the see-through effect. But you wouldn't see it that much anyways from some camera angles. Yeet.
Where was that again? The screen reflection?
So over here, so in render settings, and then screen space reflections.
Okay.
And they and then you have to make sure that the thing is set to opaque.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
But it's a little bit more tricky. Where is my? Oh, there we go. Oh.
when you look through the camera, there's sometimes I've experienced that my camera is all zoomed in, so I don't see this perspective around the camera, just on the blackness around what you see in the view. Sometimes I don't know, I have pressed anything that makes it zoom all the way in the camera.
Maybe you just scrolled.
Yeah, maybe I just scrolled. Yeah.
If you just scroll out, then does that fix it?
I think maybe that's it's just because I use a Mac mouse. It's also very strange.
Okay.
There's
Yeah.
some makes weird things. Yeah, but it's just
Hmm.
when I zoom, then I zoom in the image actually with it.
Yeah.
So I
Don't
need to
actually
go out of
know.
in the perspective probably.
Yeah. Do you have those black things around the perspective now? Did you set those?
Yeah, I have
okay.
that. Yes.
Okay. I don't know if actually there's a way to lock this view. Maybe there is.
That are actually quite neat because if you forget to do stuff or you accidentally hit the camera or something, you found the right angle.
I mean, the camera is locked as long as this thing is not turned on. If camera to view is turned on, then now it's not locked and it follows,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
But if it's on, then it'll be a problem. Ah, right, because it's scaled. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, well, you could do what William did last time and animate the camera, and then you can figure out what angle you like. Try a few different ones.
Yeah. Oh, there.
Whereas you used to have to do that on Maya because the camera isn't locked.
There we go. Better.
Cool. If there's anything, if there isn't anything else, then let's stop a little earlier today.
Yeah. There's a lot more.
Very
But
cool. More questions.
Yeah, I know. No. It's very cool.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining, everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks for the session and thanks for all your input, William. Looking forward to. I think we'll try to set it up the next one on next Thursday also, the final session.
Sweet.
If you are able to do that, William.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine.
Perfect.
Wait, next time is it's on the 3rd. Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah.
Cool.
Great.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you guys.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.